biohacking, performance, mastery, mindset, holistic health. This is a show about getting better every single day. I'm on a mission, guys, to help over 1 million people get healthy and lose weight. Why? Because when you lose weight and get healthy, you have higher self-esteem. You have more self-confidence. And that person goes out and crushes their goal and starts living the highest version of themselves, and then they have way more impact on the world. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to the show. I am super excited to have Samantha Skyring on the show today. She's a single mom, entrepreneur, and the founder of Oryx Desert Salt. Samantha, welcome to the show.
Fantastic. Thank you, from down in the very tip of Africa in Cape Town.
Yeah, I am super blessed to have you on the show and just super excited. You know, we just met recently serendipitously at the biohacking, or I call it the biohacking. I guess now it's called, what is it called? It's not the biohacking
Upgrade
conference.
Labs.
The Upgrade Labs conference. Yeah, and we got a chance to connect there, and you were blowing my mind about salt. And I thought I knew enough about salt, but apparently I didn't. So, you know, I'm curious for you, like, how did you get started, like, you know, becoming passionate about salt, and like, why has it become now like your life's mission to like educate people about salt and this specific salt?
Amazing. So, I mean, life. I love life in retrospect. I love the journey and watching how one's life sort of weaves a pathway. So actually, before Oryx Desert Salt, I had an NGO, which was called 20,000 Drums, and we ended up workshopping 30,000 children around the country. It was called Transformation Through Celebration, and it was profound as well, an amazing 7 years of my life. And then there was a financial crash, so I was looking for something new to do, and a friend of mine had discovered the salt after he had gone on a mission to find a food product with a spiritual quality to it. And salt is in the Bible 49 times. It's in every religion. It's in every culture. There's so much tradition and history and magic and alchemy around salt. So he was actually selling it overseas in bulk, and he didn't really want to put the time and effort into South Africa. He thought that South Africa was too small, and I started using the salt, and I knew that I'd gifted it to some friends, and we wanted more. We wanted to be able to go to the shop and purchase it, and I really believe that's part of the magic, because I think if a beautiful product comes from a country, it's really important that the people of that country have access to it, and it doesn't get sent overseas. So so I started packing grinders on my dining room table, and then last year we launched nationally in Whole Foods after 12 years. Yeah.
So cool. Okay, now, I did kind of know a little bit about this, and I want to just tell you, like, my salt journey. I was on whatever regular table salt, and then, you know, and then when I got into the bulletproof lifestyle, I learned about this thing called Himalayan pink salt. This was all the rage at the time. This is like 10 years ago. And I go, oh, we got to switch. We got to switch from the regular table salt to Himalayan because it's better. It's got more minerals. And then I learned over time, like, Himalayan may not be the best. And so I switched to Celtic sea salt. So this has been my journey. Now all I've done is Celtic. Then I meet you, and you're like, well, all of those are trash. So, so tell me why, you know, tell me why, like, the majority of all these salts that we're accustomed to is really probably not beneficial for our health, and like, what's going on with the Himalayans, the Celtics, and all these other salts that are on the market that really separates, you know, that from Oryx.
Yeah. So I would first like to honor Himalayan salt, because it did exactly that. I think it has switched on the majority of people off table salt. And table salt, in my next life, when I have the capacity I'm going to take on the governments, I don't believe should be legal to be on shelf. Wow. And if it is on shelf, it should be in the domestic, you know, next to the bleachers, and it's good for your red wine stains. And it should be called sodium chloride with chemicals. It isn't salt. It's not a balanced mineral with the minerals and trace elements that it's supposed to have, the essential minerals. And so table salt is in essence industrial salt. So PVC, plastic, C stands for chloride. So salt is a binding agent, and so it goes into paint and plastic, and that's why it's so important for us, because it's actually it's a medium, and salt is essential for our brain chemistry, for our neural pathways to fire and connect with one another. That little the medium in which our neural pathways are, salt is the connector, and for our digestion. So Himalayan, beautiful, it's pink, and we all went, wow, especially the women, it's so pretty, let's put it on the table. And so it created an amazing global awareness. So I really feel like it had an important job in the place of almost consciousness of upgrading our food and our choices. And it also put gourmet salt as a category. It created gourmet salt as a category, because now, oh wow, you can get salt not from the Himalayas, it's actually from Pakistan, but Pakistani salt doesn't have the same exotic ringtone. And so and it is mineral rich, and so it really was an important part of the journey of salt, so to speak. So off table salt onto Himalayan salt, sea salt. Again, 50, 100 years ago, when we weren't an industrial, globalized planet, and there wasn't the industry that there is today, and there wasn't the pollution that there is today. I think there's about 1 billion tons of effluent that's dumped into the oceans annually by the cruise ships.
Wow.
They did a test. I mean, there are various tests that one can research, but there is one particular one. They tested 20 salts. They tested 39 salts from 20 countries around the world, and 90% of them were found to have microbead plastics in them because of the damage and because of all of our packaging. And we're eating our waste now. It's quite a shocking reality. And then there was the Fukushima nuclear radiation disaster, which is still ongoing.
Wow.
And that's leaching out into the oceans. And the oceans are a beautiful living body of water. And so everything is moving. Nothing is static in the oceans. So sea salt, whatever you draw up from the oceans and sun dry, there's going to be some contaminant of some sort in there. And it's not a new awareness, but it seems to be, I seem to be more aware of it at the moment, is, all water has got memory. I'm not sure if you're aware of Dr. Masaru Emoto's work, the crystalline structure of water and words, and how important it is to take care of our own thoughts, because it's actually affecting our biology.
Yeah.
And so there's moisture in salt. There's moisture in this beautiful desert salt, and there's moisture in the oceans. And so there's been so much dumped in the oceans. Sea salt, for me, doesn't have that pure vibration, and it isn't clean anymore. So it still would have the minerals and trace elements, but it's got a whole lot of other things, which I've become a salt snob. What can I say?
Yeah.
And I'd love to share with you where this beautiful. So this is Oryx Desert Salt, and it comes from and we've got grinders and refills. So it comes from the desert. It's not sea salt, and there's a beautiful region north of South Africa, also into Botswana and Namibia, the neighboring countries, and it is 9 million hectares, and it's quite hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
But if you imagine 1.5 times the size of Texas, that is the size of the Kalahari Desert, and that still fits inside the Kalahari Basin, which is 2.7 billion. It's 3 times the size of the Kalahari Desert, and inside that space is our beautiful 20 square miles. Sorry, I've got to keep converting.
Yeah, thank you.
And what they discovered underground was a 55 million ton salt lake. The salt lake is fed by underground rivers, 3 rivers that flow 100 and 300 feet underground. And they flow through rock strata that have been tested. They're called Dwika, the type of rock strata, and they've been tested at 280 to 300 million years old. So they are ancient, pristine, pure. And as these rivers flow through these ancient rock strata, they pick up the vital minerals and trace elements together with the salt. We draw it up onto the salt pan, and when we do, that salt water has not been touched by humans. And for me, that's quite profound and very rare on the planet these days. And then it's sunrise in the Kalahari in summer in 4 weeks. So it goes through a whole lunar cycle. It has the desert wind, and it reaches up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's got this very hot desert sun. And we harvest it, we pack it. The coarse granules in the grinder are literally raw coarse off the salt pan and put through a sieve just to get the 2 to 4 millimeter crystals. And that's this beautiful pure salt from the middle of Africa.
Wow. I love that. Okay, so there's some big things that you said, and I'm a big believer in a lot of it. So one is the microplastics and the plastics. I'm actually in the process of writing a book and talking about really it's a book geared towards holistic weight loss. But one of the things I'm talking about in some of the interviews I've had is the water. And there's a lot of great articles. If you look, you can see like the Maldives is just full of plastic chemicals. There's that recent article that has been going around showing that like we are consuming like a credit card worth of plastic like every day or something like that. I mean, there's just so much plastic. And then there's a great doctor, Dr. Shauna Swan, who talks about these phthalates and these plastics and these estrogen mimickers and how it is really affecting women's fertility, men's testosterone. And we are entering this epidemic of, women can't get pregnant. And what is the source of this? An accumulation of toxins, and one of them being the microplastics. And so I love that you just said that, and we're just not unaware. We're unaware. I think like one of the things you told me is Himalayan salt, for example, the way they get it is they use dynamite to blow it out, right? So there's
such a huge demand. They don't really have a choice but to extract it with dynamite. So there is potentially toxic residue in there. We're not sure. And apparently some of the communities are getting paid $10 per ton. So that doesn't feel very cool either.
Yeah, there's no incentive to like really, purify this or do a good job. And I know Oryx does a great job, and we'll talk about that too, is in how you give back. But I think it's a huge problem. And if we can reduce that toxic load, whether it be our water and our salt, I mean, these are common things that we're constantly putting in our bodies. And so we need there needs to be some purity. I recently in the last year switched to distilled water just because of that. And a lot of the functional medicine practitioners that I'm surrounded with were noticing in all of their patients, guess what? Some of the things you're talking about, radioactive elements was coming up for them. And toxic metals kept coming up, pesticides like glyphosate, all these things kept coming up in these clients over and over again. And guess what the source was? The water. When they changed the water, people got better. So really interesting. And then the second thing you mentioned that I want to point to, you said is water has life. And I had a great podcast guest on Jonathan Butts, who's the CEO of Natural Action Tech. And we were talking about that. Water has a DNA. It has life. And when it's going through, like you said, when water's traveling through the rocks, it's forming this life. And the DNA of water somewhere in South Africa is completely different where I'm at in the United States and Idaho. And that's beautiful. But a lot of this life is contaminated or destroyed through bottled water, for example. And we lose a lot of that energy, that life. And so your salt, like you're saying, there is this vibration that comes up with it. It's not just the minerals, which of course that's great, but it's actually like this, it is a life. And I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah. In fact, water, when it goes through square pipes to reach our homes, that breaks, that breaks that life and that vibrancy and the frequency. And if one was to put water back into a free flow formation, that life, that movement, that infinity symbol actually brings that life back into water, which is quite fascinating as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. So you mentioned we've got obviously the purity. Oryx is just, I mean,
Mm.
we know the purity is there. What else makes, Oryx Desert Salt different? Do you notice other than purity and the vibrancy, is there a difference in minerals or anything else that everyone should know about?
So all salts have a same but different. So we've got the 75 minerals and trace elements, but obviously from this beautiful ancient rock strata in the desert, it's got its own special balance of minerals and trace elements. And I believe that it's perfectly balanced by nature. So it's given in the ratio that the body resonates and understands and responds to for our health. And so if any salt is, so like table salt, it is demineralized, and so the body doesn't recognize it as a whole food because it actually isn't. It's been,
Mm,
it's been adulterated. And then interestingly, it has a really beautiful flavor. So
yeah.
it's a bit like I compare it with a fine wine. Different wines have a different terroir. And so when you actually do a direct comparison and you grind Oryx
Which
salt
I
onto
did
your
at the
hand,
biohacking conference,
you
which we
did.
did there. We did like a little tequila kind of shot and but with salt, no tequila. And you had me test the two differences. And so yeah,
Yes.
explain like what will people notice? I know what I experienced, but what will people notice typically?
So generally, Oryx salt seems to open up all of the taste buds. So it's more than salt; it's almost a flavor enhancer. Whereas sea salt tends to pick up the salty, bitter, and sharp. And it's
Mm.
interesting. I still haven't done it, but I need to stand at a conference and have a little camera and watch people's reactions because generally people say to Oryx, "Yeah, that's salty," but it's a neutral. And then as soon as they have sea salt, it's like, "Ugh, that's too salty." And
Yeah.
there tends to be quite a sharp bitterness and an astringent, and it's harsh. So there is, as well as the minerals and trace elements, the purity, it actually has an amazing flavor as well, which is awesome.
Yeah. And then also just talk about, you guys, some of the philanthropy and some of the things that you guys are doing to give back.
So yeah, so as I mentioned to you earlier, um, prior to Oryx, I had an NGO where we workshopped 30,000 children around the country in a project called Transformation Through Celebration, and making a difference and giving back has always just been close to my heart. And I come from a privileged environment, and the beautiful Bushman sand communities of the Kalahari, which are actually the first people on the planet, have been marginalized over the last 100 or 200 years even. And it wasn't that long ago where the last Gwikwe, and it's got a Gwikwe tribe. They have the Click language, and they were the last roaming tribe of the Bushmen, and they went into a settlement because of the fences, because of the environment. They were suffering from drought. They were suffering from starvation, and so their life revolved around finding water and spending days tracking an animal. And when they did, there was a prayer and a blessing for the spirit of the animal. They were incredibly connected to all of the elements and so absolutely in tune. They could see what happened on the earth, what the interaction with animals. They were able to feel when there was an animal within a certain distance from them, even though that they couldn't see it with their own eyes.
Wow.
And so this was the land where the Bushmen roamed freely. And I believe that the Salts also got a bit of their wisdom and the connection with all of the elements. And so there is a beautiful project where there was a land reclaim, and our national parks gave land back to two communities, the Kamani San and the Mir communities. And in fact, there was a lot of fraction between them. And when this happened, there was a unity and there was a healing that happened. And then there's a beautiful lodge called Kaus Lodge, and it actually overlooks a heart-shaped salt pan, and it's right in the center of the two lands that were given back to them. And so we give a donation of sales back into the communities to support education and to support what is needed and required by the community.
Very cool.
So it's and also, I started, as I mentioned, packing grinders on my table, and we now have a packing room of 10 staff. They all come from a disadvantaged community, close to where our packing house is, and so we've grown from 1 to, I think we're about 23 staff now. So it's probably feeding 15 or so families, or it's feeding 23 families actually, and that spin-off is even more than that.
I love that. One of the things when we connected, actually, because we connected prior to the conference just via email, and one of the things that just really gravitated me to you was your background, single mom, entrepreneur. I mean, I'm not a single mom, but I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur, and I know what it's like to have kids. So I totally resonated with your story, and I just loved your mission, and then what you stood for, but then also how you're giving back. And I love that. That's what you're doing. You're finding ways to give back. I'm a big believer in that too.
Yeah, I believe in flow, and it's been a beautiful journey of, when you give back here, it doesn't necessarily come from there; it comes from somewhere else, and really bridging the gap where we can.
Yeah. One last thing about what makes your salt different too, and I know you talk about this a lot, is the grinder. And you talk about, I didn't realize this until you mentioned it, but I guess most grinders are, guess what, made of plastic.
Yeah.
And so you guys use a ceramic grinder, right?
Yes. So the casing is plastic, but inside the white mechanism is ceramic. And so we say that our grinders are 20 times and more refillable. I've had mine in my kitchen for about 5 years. And so you only buy your grinder once, and then you just keep refilling and refilling and refilling. And yes, I haven't found another product in the US that has anything besides the plastic or the polycarb grinder head. And so when you buy that, you grind, as you're grinding salt into your food, you're grinding plastic over your food too. And then you throw it away and you voluntarily buy another one, and you grind more plastic into your food. And you keep throwing and you keep purchasing. And so last year we saved about 500,000 grinders and heads from landfill or recycling, because all of our loyal consumers are just buying the refill boxes. So it ends up being a whole lot cheaper than buying one grinder and 4 of the refill boxes that refills at 10 times, versus buying 11 grinders and throwing them away and buying another 11. So it's making a difference to the planet, it's making a difference to your health, and it actually feels different as well, which is really interesting. The ceramic grinder is very smooth.
It is.
But when you become aware of the plastic, it's cranky and it's hard, and that's because the salt is actually grinding and wearing away the plastic teeth inside.
Ah, wow. Okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you another question too, just about salt in general. And I mean, just because you are a salt expert, and, I work with a lot of weight loss and just health clients, health coaching clients. And what comes up often is, oh, Joel, I don't want to put too much salt on my food, or I don't, salt I was told was bad. And I'm always trying to reprogram them and say, that's actually not true. So I'm curious, here you are, you are a salt expert. Like, what do you think about that in terms of like salt always being demonized as it's the villain of hypertension and blood pressure? Like, what are you seeing? What are you really seeing out there? Or what are your thoughts?
It's a really sad fact, actually, that the doctors have been indoctrinated that salt is bad. It's bizarre that a mineral that is so absolutely essential to us, to our life and our existence, has been demonized. And I think there's a beautiful book by Dr. James Di Nicolantonio, and he's a cardiovascular researcher. And the way he put it really summed it up for me, is that the wrong white crystal got the bad rap. So between sugar and salt, so sugar is obviously a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they look very similar. And so somehow through media, through propaganda, I guess, the the attention wasn't put onto sugar and its effects on our health. Salt was used as a scapegoat, essentially. But water and salt are the essence of life. We can't live with either one of them. Although, interestingly, to some degree, it's become true because table salt is toxic for us.
Yeah.
So if table salt is called salt in that regard, yes. So I really feel like we need to start splitting and defining very clearly between refined and processed and unrefined and unprocessed and whole and mineral rich. It's a bit like if I was to give you a glass of balsamic vinegar with your beautiful medium rare filet or Wagyu beef steak. And, you'd be shocked. I go, oh, but it comes from grapes. It's not the same thing. So we really... table salt is an absolute, as I said, put it underneath your sink and use it for wine stains. Whereas choosing the salt that you have, and obviously it's also making choices and really understanding what are the products you're purchasing from the supermarket that are produced. Any cooked meals or packaged meals have salt in them. And they're using a table salt and a refined because it's easier, because it flows and it doesn't clump. So what's fascinating is salt's intrinsic value and its real job, so to speak, is that it is hygroscopic and it absorbs moisture. So table salt has got all these various different chemicals stopping it from absorbing moisture, which is sacrilegious in a way. It's like, hang on, that's what I'm supposed to do. I need to be in the body to help the body, the cells and the intercellular fluid to stay hydrated because it holds the moisture. So there's this perfect balance between the water you drink and the salt that you take. And I'm sure many people have heard of putting a pinch of salt in your water. And because actually drinking 3 liters or something of water without having salt in it, often that water flushes through. And it's quite an interesting experiment. When you put the salt in, you don't seem to flush it through quite as much. Because the salt and the water create this beautiful alchemical balance for the body to absorb and hold on to the hydration, which is so essential.
Yeah. And just to be clear, when you're saying table salt, you're talking about like sodium chloride specifically, right?
Exactly that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's had all of the minerals and trace elements pulled out of it. It's pure sodium chloride with, I don't know, there's one article, choose your poison. There's 20 different aluminum silicate and ferrum phosphate and chemicals that the body doesn't relate to or know what to do with. And so, yes, it does make your food taste better, but it's not offering your body what is essential to it. Yeah. And salt is the smallest ingredient in any meal, but it makes the biggest difference. So choosing your salt makes the biggest difference as well.
Yeah, 100%. I always tell clients, I'm like, listen, salt is not the enemy. The problem is, I'm like, you should be salting your food all the time. What the biggest culprit of people getting too much salt intake in their diet is processed food. I'm like, instead, put down the white processed bread that is loaded with sodium chloride and all kinds of other crap, and just salt your foods normally, and you'll be just fine. And so it's a paradigm shift. So I'm glad we're
yeah, it is. Yeah, and I really believe that, and I think Himalayan also had a part to play in this. But the fact is, when you start choosing the salt that you're putting into your meal and into your cooking, I am trusting that will translate into people's awareness growing in, well, where is my vegetables coming from, and what is the source of my meat? And actually, like a little bit of a grind and a sprinkle of consciousness, because you're starting to create awareness of the other products, because this is the smallest one. So then it makes sense that people will start investigating and getting curious about what the source is of their other products.
I love that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, now that you mentioned, this could be the jump off for a lot of people to really start to completely change their health. And I know, like, for all of us, when I started this podcast, The Hack Life, I always think about hacks, but I also don't like hacks because I always tell people like you'll never get to mastery trying to hack your way through life. You do need to know, like you need to master things and you need to have systems. But sometimes when we just learn a hack here and a hack here, that becomes the momentum or the nudge to get us to transform your life. And I know for me, that
Yes.
was also true. So I love that. I'm curious, any exciting projects that you're working on right now?
So yeah, obviously it's been a dream to be in the US from the very beginning, and we only launched last year. So the US really is my big project and my intention.
Let's go.
I'm so and I'm so deeply grateful to Whole Foods and to the very beautiful buyer that I met originally, who understood it. He got it, and that was so exciting for me. And because apparently they don't often, or not anymore, give a global listing, which means that it's in all stores across the US. And so now it is mostly accessible. I know some people are a few hours from Whole Foods. It is also available on our website. We've recently launched a web shop. And in fact, if you pop onto the web shop and you put in a Joel 10, you will get a 10% discount.
There we go.
And our products on our web shop are also at wholesale. So you can buy a box of 6 and you can share it with your friends and your family, and you can get your loved ones hooked and switched on to good Oryx Desert Salt.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead and do that, guys. Joel 10. I don't get anything. I don't get any money or any kickback from that. I just completely believe in the product, and I just want to pass those discounts back to my listenership. So thanks for bringing that up. Really
Pleasure.
cool.
And it really is a lifestyle gift. It's a great stocking filler. Everyone uses salt every single day. And it's been so interesting because when I first had the idea and I told my mom, and she was like, "What? It takes me so long to get through a box of salt. Like you've got to sell so much salt." But everyone uses salt on every meal practically, and so by gifting it to somebody that you love, you know that you're really doing a good thing. You're making a difference to their health and to their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And to the planet, and in fact there's history around gifting salt. I think it's in the Jewish tradition. If you move homes, you give salt and bread, which are the two things that you in a way that you need in a home. Is you need bread and you need salt, and you break bread together. There's that whole beautiful tradition around breaking bread. And so there's beautiful tradition in it as well, and a ritual, so to speak. So it's a lovely part, something beautiful to do for friends and families.
Yeah. One quick question though. I noticed a couple of things. One is when we met in person, you gave me an Oryx Desert wine salt, which I thought was really neat. And I also saw you guys have pepper on the website, which I love. Salt and pepper goes together. Great. We can just get all in one. But what's the formulation on the wine salt? What makes that different? How should people use that? And then also on the pepper note, I don't even know how pepper is cultivated. So is there some deep
Something
pepper,
special.
something special that it's unadulterated, just like the salt?
Pretty much. I mean, it's taken me a long time. I want to support Africa and the people in Africa. But there aren't many suppliers of salt in Africa besides Madagascar, which is a little piece of Africa that's broken off. And Madagascar is one of the most corrupt countries apparently in the world. Oh. So we are supporting small scale farmers in Madagascar. So buying our salt is also making a difference, which is amazing. And apparently, interestingly, I love salt, but I don't like pepper. But apparently it's a really amazing, pungent and flavorful pepper. So do try that. So Joel, you were actually one of the lucky ones. I'm not sure if I'll be launching the wine salt in the US. That was some of my last bottles that I had. But we have a very beautiful, yeah, lucky you. We've got a very beautiful smoked salt, and it's an authentically cold smoked over French oak shavings for 18 hours in a very beautiful little wooden smokehouse shack on the edge of an amazing river out in a couple of hours from Cape Town. And we also have possibly one of the only free from barbecue salts on the market. So please start reading your labels. There's a lot of nonsense in barbecue salts. Often they put a third or a half of the bottle is maize or wheat fillers. They call it fillers, and that's so that they don't have to pay the cost of the spices, because obviously spices is, the cost of those are more. And so our barbecue is pure spice, Oryx salt, some herbs, and mix in a very beautiful blend. And nothing added that isn't supposed to be in this. There's absolutely no nonsense. And it is, interestingly, I didn't use my barbecue salt for a couple of years. And then one day I had a bottle and I was like, well, let me just sprinkle it on these butternuts that I'm roasting. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And now I put my barbecue salt on almost everything.
Yeah.
My fried eggs in the morning. My son puts it on his popcorn. So please, try that out as well. It's quite amazing.
Okay, that's great. I didn't even know about that. So I'm going to have to stay tuned on the newsletter and make sure that I'm getting all these different variety of salts. I mean, it's really neat. And I mean, as you grow, I mean, I'm sure you can do so many cool things, like have different salts for different seasons of the year. Like we're going in the US, we're going into the fall, but I'm sure, like you said, barbecue, there's gonna be so many different genres of different salts. So I look forward to seeing all the cool things you guys come up with.
Awesome. Yeah, anyone who does purchase via the website will obviously get your email address, and we have the most delicious lemon salt. It's organic lemon, organic orange, a little bit of organic sugar and salt. It is the best rim salt for a margarita, and it can take a really bad margarita to the best margarita you've ever had. So I'm really looking forward to getting to a place where we can, I'll reach out to everyone and ask, if they're interested, if they would purchase it, if we were to launch it on our web shop, which I'm sure most people will. So look out in 3 or 6 months' time. I'm really excited to launch the lemon salt.
Awesome. Promoting alcoholism too. Here we go. Just kidding.
The occasional margarita on a Friday afternoon. Can't do anyone any harm.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff. I want to wrap things up and jump into some lightning round questions that I have for you. But before we do it, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Maybe why is it called Oryx Desert Salt?
Samantha, why is it called Oryx Desert Salt?
So this beautiful creature
I love the logo,
the Oryx gazelle, the logo. And let me try bring it closer. It actually has a heart for real on its forehead. So it's a gazelle which is endemic to the Kalahari Desert. And many years ago, when I didn't have a child or a business and I had no responsibility, I was wild and free. I actually did an incredible 5-month journey in Namibia. And if you haven't been to Namibia or South Africa, I really urge all of you to put it on your bucket list. So Namibia is predominantly desert, and we ended up in the very north, which is the border of Angola and Namibia, and we hadn't got to this enigmatic place called the Skeleton Coast, where there are whale bones, and it is so remote, it's really hard to get to. And so we ended up doing 120 kilometer, a 75-mile walk along the Kunene, but the Kunene River is very windy. So we'd actually leave the river in the morning after pre-hydrating. And that was an interesting learning that I had, is before you go on a hike or a walk is to drink a lot of water so that you're not playing catch up. So you never get to a place of dehydration. You hydrate before and then you top up as you go along. And I ended up having close encounters with the Oryx within 10 feet. And so some years later, when I had the opportunity to brand and create a product from this beautiful salt from the Kalahari, this masked creature with the horns. So one of our hashtags is spot the horns in Whole Foods, or spot the horns wherever you can, actually. And I discovered also later on, a couple of years later, once it was already the logo, is that some Oryx can go their whole lives without drinking water, but they can't go weeks without licking salt. The salt is so important to their survival in the incredibly harsh conditions of the Kalahari Desert. And their hair is hygroscopic, so they absorb the moisture and the dew from the desert air at nighttime, and they hydrate hypodermically, which is another phenomenon. But it's the salt and the fact that the salt allows them to stay hydrated. And so it really is the perfect symbol for this beautiful salt from the desert.
Wow, that is amazing. I knew a little bit about the hike, but I didn't know about the Oryx and that specificity. So that's amazing. Awesome
Yeah.
stuff. All right, you ready for some lightning round questions, and then we'll kind of wrap things up?
Sure.
I know.
Fire away.
All right. Samantha, I'm curious, what are some choices that you made that you think made you who you are today?
Some choices.
Or a choice, or a choice. Maybe it was just like there's a choice that just sticks out in your head.
So I have to say, there's been one person who's been quite intrinsic to my journey of trusting. Michael A.J. Singer. I don't know if you've heard of. He's written 2 books: The Surrender Experiment
Yeah.
and The Untethered Soul.
Yeah. Love those books.
Really trusting. There've been quite a few things along this journey that would have been, put me into complete fear or were potentially the end of my business. I had a partner for a year, and after a year, he simply didn't want to be part of the business anymore. And I was in a corner. We were still new. We were small. We weren't growing. And by just trusting and doing the work and having faith and having an intention has just pulled me through some pretty scary situations.
Amazing. I love that. Every entrepreneur needs to hear that over and over again, because there's a lot of days where you
Right.
think you aren't going to make it, and yeah, faith over fear. Love that. You know,
Absolutely.
you're doing so much for the health and wellness world, and I'm curious, who inspires you, or anybody that you're following, or yeah, who inspires you?
Sure. I mean, I realize that being inspired is part of the values and my pillars of building Oryx. I need to stay inspired. And in fact, that biohacking conference, thank you, Dave Asprey. Thank you. Thank you, all the beautiful people who were there. It was such an inspiring place, and everyone was inspired by each other and the information that was being shared. So I'm often moving between. I listen to podcasts and audiobooks constantly. I mean, we live in such an incredible time that all this knowledge is just being shared.
Yeah.
And so Robin Sharma, I followed for quite a while, the 5 a.m. club.
Okay.
That he got me through quite a few periods where I just needed that dedication of getting up and having that practice.
Yeah.
Dr. Zach Bush was my shining light through Corona. His wisdom is incredible, and I'm really excited because he's coming to South Africa in November.
Oh, nice.
And in fact, I think it was 2 years ago, sort of at the end, towards the end of the first year of the pandemic, I ended up sending him some salt just to say, thank you. You've just been such an inspiration to me. And then, of course, I've got onto Rich Roll and Aubrey Marcus, and we're living in a time of such incredible people. Joel, thank you for sharing all the knowledge that you are, and connecting and networking and drawing the dots together.
Yeah.
So I bounce around a lot, I have to say.
You do.
In fact, Joe Dispenza at the moment is one of my key people. And I've had a couple of really profound experiences of going deep into the meditation and putting an intention, and some really profound magic has happened. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, love that. I am a big reader, as you can see. I got a whole bunch of books behind me.
I can see.
Are there any books that for you that stood out for you, or that had a huge impact on your life, that you'd recommend someone else read as well?
So I do audiobooks more than reading.
Sure.
Although there are a few. One of the recent ones is it's a book by Toka Paterna. It's called Belonging. And it's just the book is, but every page, almost every sentence is poetry. That's been quite incredible. As I mentioned, Michael A.J. Singer's 2 books.
Yeah.
There's a recent book that I read, and it's called The Last Bushman Winter Has Come. and it is actually available on Amazon. And the author, Paul Myberg, lives still in Cape Town, and he lived with the Bushmen for on and off for 30 years, but for I think 7 years he lived with the loincloth and with the last tribe, the Geeked tribe, and the way he's brought across their nature, their spirit, and how they lived is also quite an incredible and profound read. So if you're looking for something different, that I'd highly recommend.
Awesome. Love that. And then, last two questions and we'll wrap it up. Any rituals or hacks or practices that you do on a regular basis? Some people have gratitude practices or journaling. What do you do?
Gratitude is one of my pillars. It's a constant. I think it needs to be everyone's practice. I live in an incredibly beautiful place, Cape Town. I'm surrounded by mountains. I'm very blessed to have a very cold ocean on my doorstep, literally 2 minutes. So this morning I went and had my 20-minute swim in, I'm not sure, 40, 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, wow.
So actually at the conference, I was in the cold tub for about 6 or 7 minutes. And everyone who followed behind me, I didn't want to stay in longer because there was a long queue and everyone else jumped in for 2 minutes. So I realized that my cold swimming has definitely built my capacity for the cold.
Oh, yeah.
And that has helped me through some really stressful times and some moments where there could have been complete panic, but it definitely builds one's capacity to handle stress. And where I swim, it's a little wild corner of the ocean. The magic that I've had down at the beach, that's one of my daily practices.
Awesome. Last but not least, Samantha, where can people find you and the good people at Oryx Desert Salt?
Awesome. Thank you. So Oryx, so I want to just put up the packaging because it's an unusual spelling, Oryx Desert Salt. So if you were to just Google that on our web shop, please follow us on Instagram. We've got some very beautiful posts that we really feel like we're sharing the magic of Africa on our Instagram. And our web shop, our USA web shop is there as well. My direct cell phone number is on our contacts page. My email address, the inquiry email, will come directly to me. If you have any questions, please feel free, reach out.
Awesome. Samantha Skyring from Oryx Desert Salt, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate you.
It's been amazing. Love chatting to you, Joel. Thank you.